Good morning, everyone. Good to see everyone out this morning for our worship service. We'll be spending some time in the Old Testament today, so if you'd like to turn to the book of Ruth, we'll be looking at the character the individual who gives this book its name. Ruth is one of the ancestors of Jesus, in the direct line of David, and we'll be talking a little bit about her story and how it affects our lives as Christians here today. You know, when I started a couple weeks ago talking about Mary Magdalene, I didn't really intend to start a series on women in the Bible, but sometimes once you get on a roll, things just happen. And that's why we're continuing that today. Now, we're going to cover in a survey style the entirety of this book in a short time here this morning, but I would encourage you to go back and read the rest of the book and the parts that we sort of jump over on your own time this week and spend some time looking at this remarkable woman of Ruth. It's just 4 chapters long, won't take you very long. You can just do 1 chapter a day between now and the rest of the week. You'll be done by Thursday, so it'll be a good way to spend some time. But starting at the beginning here, we're going to actually be looking at Ruth's mother-in-law, who is the reason why this story begins the way it does. Ruth ends up being the wife of one of the sons of this couple, Naomi and her husband Elimelech. Naomi and Elimelech are living in Bethlehem, and then a famine happens on the land. And so in Judah, there's not enough food to go around. The people needs to be able to sustain themselves, and so rather than just try and scrape by and compete for everybody else for the food that's here, Elimelech and Naomi make the decision to actually move to a neighboring country, and they go to the land of Moab and settle there. While they are there, their 2 sons who are named Mahlon and Kilion end up getting married. And unfortunately, all 3 of the men in our story here so far die while they are in Moab. And so this just leaves Naomi with her 2 daughters-in-law alone in this foreign country, and they're fending for themselves for a while. Then we hear in verse 6, or rather Naomi hears, that there has been relief. The famine has ended. Bethlehem now has enough food to go around. She can go back to her hometown and her own people from her family, and she'll be able to survive back home. But of course, she's not leaving under the most pleasant circumstances. She's leaving her late husband and her 2 sons behind. And so she tells her daughters-in-law that there's no need for them to follow her back home. They're Moabite women. They're from this country, and there's no reason to go to a foreign country with her, their mother-in-law. She says, I'm not going to have any sons for you to marry. I'm not going to get remarried. And she said, even if I had a son tomorrow, or what are you going to do? Wait until the baby grows up to get married to one of my sons again? She said, so just go back to your mothers and get remarried and live a happy life. You're younger women than I am. So I'll just go back and find my own way in my hometown. This is a good enough set of reasons for one of her 2 daughters-in-law named Orpah, and Orpah takes the excuse and very tearfully, I will add, leaves her mother-in-law and goes back to her own family, while Ruth, our main character for today, decides to stay with her mother-in-law. And that's where we're going to read a little bit from Ruth. In chapter 1 and verse 16, we see this reply when Naomi tells her, go home. Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. You go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So Ruth has made a decision. I got married. You're part of my family now. I'm going to follow you and take care of. We'll take care of each other. We'll manage back home in Bethlehem. I'm not going to go back to my mother. I'm going to stay with you. And this decision doesn't come merely out of her affection for her mother-in-law alone, although certainly there seems to have been some of that, right? We can even see that from the other daughter-in-law who cries and is, sad at the idea of leaving her mother-in-law behind. In American culture, I think it's pretty common to make jokes about not liking your mother-in-law and all these other kind of things. I think that's one of the most sort of oldest genres of jokes going back for whoever knows how long. But that's not the case here. Naomi's the kind of person where her daughters-in-law want to stay with her, and even the one who makes the decision to leave is sad at making the decision to part. But here, Ruth says, "You can't convince me. I'm going to stay with you. Your God will be my God." So she has made this decision not only to stay with Naomi and to take care of her, but to effectively abandon any of her gods she may have had in Moab and to dedicate herself to the Lord as well. And this is an important point. This isn't just a personal decision that was made out of affection, but it really ends up being a decision based on her faith in the Lord. And that kind of faith carries forward. Ruth is a good example for us and the kind of person who finds her faith, even though she wasn't born into it, even though it wasn't something that she was forced to do or sort of just naturally accustomed to, but someone who decides to follow the Lord and then does so faithfully. And in that sense, Ruth's story is really a gospel story. There's plenty of people in the Old Testament who make hard decisions and try to do the right thing when the Lord tells them to. But very few times do we see examples, men or women, of people who make the decision on their own to pick the Lord and follow him. You go all the way back to Abraham. Abraham effectively gets a call from God, and God says, "Abraham, you're my guy. Pack up, take your dad, go out west. I got a place for you to live in Canaan." And he gets called. The burning bush, Moses gets called. Right? These were not decisions they were made on their own. But in a very personal and a very direct way, Ruth sees the character of her mother-in-law and what kind of people follow the Lord and says, "Wherever you go, I'll go, and whoever your God is, he's my God too." And that doesn't purely come just from her affection for her mother-in-law, but from her mother-in-law's character leading her to understand the Lord. Let's read chapter 2. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Now they're back in Bethlehem now. They've returned back to Naomi's hometown, and they're settled there. And so you've got to do something to feed yourself. Even though the famine's no longer going on, you can't just sit around and wait for DoorDash to show up. You've got to get something to eat. And so that's what's about to happen here. Verse 2, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." There's a lot of things that are foreign to us about the world that they were living in. First of all, you have to remember this is the time of the judges. There's not even a king on the throne. Their government is very decentralized and kind of more tribal and clan-like than it would be even with having a royal house in charge with all of the ministries and offices that come with that. And so, in that sense, a lot of the justice that took place was based on personal grievance. And I said that to say, if you go back and read some of the stuff in Exodus and Leviticus and some of the laws about who women belong to, sometimes it's whatever guy got to her first. And it was a very violent sort of sense of who got possession over women. Because at this time, women were treated in that regard as part of the property and part of the ownership of the man. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't treated kindly, and it doesn't even mean that they weren't seen as being worthy of respect in some ways. But from a legal standpoint, as much as there was one, that is how things were handled. And we're going to see two different potential opportunities here. She could have gone to somebody else's field, and the first guy that laid hands on her said, "All right, this one's going to be mine." Or what actually does happen. Ruth comes to this place. She finds workers who work for a faithful man, and so he has directed them to behave themselves in a certain way, and they respect his character and they emulate his character, and so they treat her with kindness and respect. And we see that from Boaz as well. He says, "Don't go anywhere else. Don't go glean on anybody else's fields. You just stay here. We'll take care of you and Naomi. You're going to get everything you need by staying with my people." And we're going to see how that plays out as we continue forward. If you already know the story, which if you've ever been to a ladies' day or a conference or anything else, this is one of the favorite stories of any women's Bible study book or anything like that. So you probably already know the ending. But there's something about the character of these people, something about the quality of their inner person that I want to examine even within this sort of alien legal framework that we wouldn't recognize in a modern world. Continuing in verse 10, though, we're going to see Ruth's response to Boaz saying, "Stay with my people. We'll take care of you. You can come get a drink whenever you need to, rest with the women whenever it's time for a break. We'll take care of you here." Verse 10, "At this she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, 'Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?' Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." What an amazing prayer and blessing that he's given to her in this moment. He doesn't owe her anything, right? He doesn't even have to be as nice as he's being to her right now. Now, the law tells you, leave some gleanings behind so that the foreigner and the poor can come pick up food. The law tells you that much. But we're going to see he goes above and beyond that in order to show kindness to her. And on top of it, at their first meeting here, he prays this prayer over her and says, "May the Lord repay you for the kindness you've done to one of my family members here with Naomi." And he specifically says it in that last verse in a very interesting way. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. You can see here that Boaz knows about her, and he knows about the reasons for her coming to be with Naomi. He knows that it's her faith that led her to believe in the Lord and come to Bethlehem and to live among Boaz's clan and his family here. Her quality of her heart, her posture towards the Lord is evident in the way she not only takes care of her mother-in-law, but the way that she approaches the people that live here in Bethlehem. Her response here in verse 13, "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing as one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." And when she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all that she wanted and had some left over. So what we see here is that she spends time with Boaz and his people, and they invite her to spend their mealtime together as they're doing their work. And he has made a point of making this stranger, this foreigner, this outsider, part of the group, that she is just there alongside them, safe and taken care of alongside everybody else. And he doesn't stop after they eat together and share their meal at the same table effectively. Verse 15, "As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men. 'Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks from her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her.' So Ruth gleaned in the fields until evening, and then she threshed the barley she had gathered. It amounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she'd gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she'd eaten enough." So not only did she get to take home what she had gathered on her own, but they also gave her, a bag lunch for whatever she had left over when she was eating with them together at their mealtime as well. And so she had food and food to share when she got back. She's well taken care of for the chore that she undertook today. By the way, in case it wasn't clear what gleaning is, and I just am going to reiterate here what the point was, she was going out hoping to pick up the stalks of the grain that were dropped accidentally in the process of harvesting. She was going to get the stuff that was overlooked by the workers in the process of getting all of this grain together to put it into, the market and put it into storage and grind it up and do all the things that they need to do with grain. So her hope was to get the leftovers, and she got an abundance over that, and then a little bit more on top of that. Because Boaz says, "Oh, just leave some on purpose. Pull some out of the stalks after you've cut them, or out of the sheaves after you've cut them, so that she has something to pick up." And then they packed up her lunch and sent it home with her too. So she has been well taken care of. And why? Simply because Boaz thought, this is a kind person who is taking care of my family member here in Naomi, and we ought to take care of her in return. She believes in the Lord. She is someone who trusts in the Lord. We should repay her kindness with our own generosity. So you've got two really kind and generous people here that have decided to start trusting each other as much as they trust the Lord. But let's not forget what Ruth is doing here. She is being brave in even attempting to do this in the first place. I will say, when she decides to go out and glean and do some work on her own, apparently they were doing okay up until the harvest started, right? Because this is sort of a new endeavor she's undertaking to go and do this gleaning. So they would have been probably all right. They probably would have made it through and just got by without her necessarily doing this. But she wants to make sure that she and Naomi are taken care of and that they're pulling their own weight. And so she goes and does this work on her own as a foreigner in a foreign country. Now, Moabites and the people of Judah are both Levantine people. They're both from the same region. I'm not saying they would have looked all that different. She probably had a different way of speaking, maybe even an entirely different language. But having that difference was enough so that people said, oh, you're that Moabite woman. Kind of be like if somebody from Jackson County came up this way. They all have, I don't know why Jackson County shares a border with Wood County, and they all talk totally different. You only have to go, like 30 miles, and they've all got a completely different accent. I feel like the Tyler County accent's probably a little bit closer to Wood County, but you guys talk different too. But that's not an important point. I'm just trying to say you don't have to go very far with people speaking the same language to know differences. Imagine if you had to cross the Jordan River over into Moab and somebody speaking a new language, not just a new dialect. My point is that Ruth steps out, and she bravely tries to go and earn things for herself, take care of herself by just getting the leftovers from the gleanings from the fields. And so she is putting a lot of trust in God and in these strangers in this strange place in order to be able to take care of herself. But what she actually gets in return is so much better. Because she doesn't just get taken care of temporarily, she actually gets a permanent place to be. I'd just like to read a few verses, skipping ahead here. Boaz and Ruth's relationship progresses. Naomi gives her some advice on how to win him over, and it's effective, and there's some odd customs that take place in there. But we'll skip ahead to another odd custom instead and look at the actual moment where Boaz decides that has already decided he's going to go ahead and try and marry Ruth and take care of her, and by extension her mother-in-law, in a more formal way. And so in chapter 4 and verse 1 we see that part of the story begin. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Now, this guardian redeemer character is an unnamed member of the family who is the closest in relationship to Naomi and Ruth. And so he would be the man who has the rights to marry her first. And so Boaz is kind of clever and shrewd in the way he handles this guy, because he gives him the opportunity to avail himself of the inheritance of Elimelech and his son's land, but doesn't mention that there's already somebody who has a claim to it in the process, namely Ruth herself. So let's go ahead and read this. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. And he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I'm the next in line." "I will redeem it," he says. So the guy says, "Okay, there's some property for sale? Sure, I can expand my production, have a bigger harvest next year, have another place to graze my sheep. Why not? Yeah, I'll pick up some extra land." But there's a catch, and Boaz brings that out right now. Then Boaz says, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you will also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this, the guardian redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in earlier times in Israel, the redemption and transfer of property became final. One party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself." And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I've also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Okay, so this legal transaction takes place. But I think that the next part is the really interesting part. Verse 11. The elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing at Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." So they give this blessing with all of these ancestors and all these great people from the past mentioned here. And indeed, this blessing does come true. Ruth is the great-grandmother of David, and the ancestor so many greats removed from Jesus as a result. This foreigner who stepped out on faith to follow the Lord back to a strange place and to be obedient to the Lord and to trust him and his people to do the right thing and shelter and protect her, becomes the great-grandmother of the great king of Israel, the one who was the one anointed by God to set up this dynasty that would continue to rule, and ultimately the one true eternal king, Jesus, as well. These two people who demonstrated this character of kindness and generosity and compassion for people end up being the ones who whose lineage gives birth to the man after God's own heart. There's another important point here. You may remember this. Your Jewish identity, whether or not you get to be counted as a Jew, is traced through your mother's side. If your mom is Jewish, you're Jewish. Not through your father, not because of your father's circumcision. Your mother's faith is what makes you a follower of the Lord. And so, this foreigner who stepped out and believed in the Lord and followed him into a foreign land and came to Bethlehem, the hometown of David, the birthplace of Jesus, becomes the ancestor through whom our great faith is established. If it wasn't for Ruth leaving and coming with Naomi, our history would be totally different. If it wasn't for her compassion and her commitment to helping those who needed it, who she cared for in the moment, if it wasn't for her commitment to believing in the Lord even when he wasn't her God, so to speak, our history would be totally different. What a great example for us. Someone who had to make the decision to follow the Lord in a time when it would have been totally understandable and acceptable. We could have no book of Ruth at all. The story could have ended with Orpah and Ruth turning around and going back home. Naomi could have gone back to Bethlehem, and that could have been the end of the story. But instead, the greatest story ever told of Jesus' birth in Bethlehem takes place because Ruth came home to Bethlehem from Moab. I hope this lesson has been encouraging for you today, and one that we can take and apply to our own lives as we consider our faith in the Lord and our decision to commit to him and follow him wherever he would have us to go. If you find yourself in need of baptism for the salvation of sins, or prayers for restoration or encouragement, or if we can help you as a church in any way, we'd invite you to come forward as we stand and sing.